Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So here we got a brand new mini-series starting for you today that I'm calling Scale and Deliver. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be talking about my favorite Taito superscaler games, and we're going to be talking about them from a historic fashion and about the scaling technology in and of itself. And of course, we're starting off with Night Striker, one of my favorite Taito games of all time. And I can't believe that this game came out in 1989, and the story set in the future of 2049. We are closer to 2049 than we are 1989, and that just makes me feel pretty damn old. But honestly, I did a video on Night Striker about 3 years ago, and in that time, my opinion of the game has only gotten better. I think this is one of the best arcade games Taito ever released. Graphically, it is incredible, especially for 89. The music by Zuntata is some of the best that Taito's ever put to a video game, and the gameplay from start to finish is just action-packed. It takes you 12 minutes for the most part from start to finish to see the ending of this game, but there are so many different routes to take. The replayability is not infinite, but you're going to get that 12 minutes times about 6. But it is just such an impressive looking game. Sega always got credit for doing superscalers. They coined the term in some ways. But Taito did as good of a job, if not in some instances slightly better in my opinion, than Sega did. And since we just did the entire Sega Arcade racing series, I felt like it was time to point a spotlight on another developer for arcades, and I've always loved Taito. You'll see here that we do get branching pathways, and that's where it kind of comes into the route you want to take. Now, some of the branching pathways are more similar than I would like them to be. Sometimes you'll go through almost the same level, but you'll get a slightly different boss. But just look at this. This is 1989, and these sprites are scaling in such a fast, rapid manner, putting things in front of you. This is incredibly close to feeling like a true 3D game, even if all it's using is sprites and background layers. And it is fast. I will say that this is a very hard game to just start with. You really need to learn how to navigate the screen and understand the world of Night Striker. But once you actually get that down and understand the screen space, you are going to be hyper impressed. This is the type of board that I've always wanted to add to my collection, but it is incredibly expensive. I've actually done 2 conversions to flight sticks for other arcade owners, so I have had a chance to play this at home on my Super Gun, and it is such a fun time. But the great part is emulation is so close. We're getting all of this beautiful scaling working in something like MAME, and it is a game that you can enjoy and play today. It did come out on the PlayStation and the Sega CD, and while those ports are decent to good, the arcade original, in my opinion, is still the way you want to play this game. But just look at this mechanical dragon snake, whatever it is, coming in and out of the water. It gives you a completely believable sense of 3D scale and perspective, and they're doing it all in 2D in 1989. I mean, we didn't even have the Super Nintendo in 89, and the Super Nintendo would not look as good as something like this. That's how good the Taito hardware developers were at making these boards, and how good the artists and programmers were at utilizing this technology, because that tunnel there is a really good approximation of pseudo 3D. But the question is, how was Taito able to pull this off in 1989? And that's down to the fact that the Taito Z board has 2 Motorola 68000 processors on them, and the second processor handles a lot of the road scaling effects. Basically, they just strapped 2 processors on and said, let's see what we can get out of the board, and you get effects like this, flying over the city while all of these different helicopters and enemies come in real time and scale into the foreground and background, all while you're flying over these sprites of buildings that, while they don't look perfectly 3D, give you an amazing sense of speed as well as being above the city, all while that background moves and shifts in real time. When the effect works, it works incredibly well, and the artists deserve so much credit being able to pull something like this off, because it's not just down to the hardware. Sure, the hardware can show you all of this scaling, but the artist did such a great job making tunnels like this, where you have the road in both directions, up and down, and you have the walls. This genuinely does feel like an immersive 3D space, and it doesn't matter how many processors you shove on a board. If your programmers and artists can't utilize that hardware to the best of its ability, it just doesn't work. But speaking of best of abilities, Zuntata 100% nailed the soundtrack on Night Striker. It is incredible, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll be right back. But enjoy. Music's just absolutely incredible, and I can't say enough good about it. I will let you listen to another piece that I love in just a few minutes, but honestly, all of the graphical effects and all of the music in the world will do nothing for a game if that game is not fun, and I cannot stress enough how much I enjoy playing Night Striker. It is action-packed from start to finish, but if you do want to play it, do yourself a favor and get access to a USB flight stick, because that is what was on the cabinets, and that's how you want to play this game. It is not as much fun with an analog controller if it's a stick, and it's definitely not as much fun if you're using a D-pad. You want that flight stick. It gives you the most immersive feeling outside of having an original cabinet for this game. So definitely keep that in mind if you want to play it. But moving on into the suburbs here, I do love all the different bosses, all the different enemies, and all the different settings we get, because now this suddenly feels like a racing game. This could be something like SCI or Super Chase. It has the same vibe, and no surprise, it's using a lot of the same hardware, not for Super Chase, but for SCI that is. So it's not at all weird that this feels like a racing game in certain points in time, because you are in a car, and if you do drive that car all the way to the bottom, you can basically run along the road. And the game does a great job of making you move all across the screen space. Sometimes all of your opponents are going to be flying around in the air, sometimes you're going to be dealing with all these tanks on the ground, so you really need to worry about how to move up and down in that screen space in real time to make sure you're attacking what you need to attack and also missing some obstructions, because you can hit things in this game. And because it is pseudo 3D and not real 3D, you do need to be careful about where you are in space when you're moving around. But then again, a boss here, just spectacular. All of these missiles scaling at the screen in real time. It is a hard fight. You need to be constantly on the move in this game, or else you're going to 100% keep getting tagged. But moving into something like the factory here, it has a completely different look. It is way more Spartan, but the amount of scaling we're getting and the effect works probably twice as good in an environment like this. Having to move up and move down really does emulate that sense of 3D as best as you could get on 2D hardware. And don't get me wrong, Sega did an incredible job with this sort of thing too. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Taito so we can give them some love. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite 2D scaling arcade game of all time is, because I would be curious about it. And I'm going to call all of these super scalers, even though Sega kind of coined that term. I'm sure Taito has a similar language for it, but just what I'm using in the series. But again, this factory, in 1989, seeing this game would have felt like seeing magic. Now, I did not get to experience it in 1989. I've actually played this only in like 2001 or 2002, so obviously 3D existed. I didn't get that same wow factor as if I had walked into an arcade in 89 and seen this on the floor. But it still gives me that same sense of wonder. This gigantic mechanical piece of, I don't know, factory equipment moving around, and while you have to sort of avoid these pillars or else take damage, it really is 3D. I understand none of it is made with 3D hardware. There are no polygons on screen, but I just consider this a 3D game, even though it takes place entirely in 2D. And moving on to the shrine level as well, like I said earlier, I would give you another bit of music because Zuntata absolutely nailed it with this. It is my favorite soundtrack of theirs of all time. So I kill these weird statue heads, do not know what they are. Go ahead and listen for like 30-35 seconds and I'll come back and close the video out and tell you some more history. But enjoy, because it is amazing.
Out of control.
I mean, all of that music is just so incredible. But moving on to the last stage in one of my playthroughs, that's the most fun part about this game. It's just something like Puzzle Bobble, where you have all those alternating branching paths. You get the same thing in something like Night Striker. You get different levels to go to, and in this ending your car explodes and you pop out and basically rocket power yourself to the final boss. But again, just how intense and incredible this is. We have bridges that we need to go underneath. We have signs that we need to shoot to make sure we don't run into. We have all of this pipe work kind of putting up an obstruction, and we need to manage all of this in real time while also fighting the enemy. In some ways, it's almost too intense, but I absolutely love that intensity. When you get to the final level, you're 100% going to take damage. And this might be the area of the game where they definitely want you to throw a few more credits in before you see an ending, but honestly we're not pumping in quarters, so what does it really matter? But just all of this going on at once, and the best part about this game is it does not lag, it does not drop frames. This is full tilt intensity from start to finish, and the hardware keeps up. And having had this board on my workbench more than once, it is a massive board, and I can see why it is rare as well. They go for about maybe like $1,400-$1,500 now if you want to pick one up. Would I do it? Probably. Should you? Probably not. I probably shouldn't either, but you never know what I will get up to next. But you'll see here we got one ending, and the endings are quite fun because there are better and worse endings depending on the path you take. So if you actually want to see the true best ending, you need to kind of navigate around. And that does give it a good amount of replayability. Even if you are in arcade, you're kind of thinking, maybe I should play again, like I'm going to do right now, moving into a different level. And every single time I play this game, I just want to keep playing it more and more. I never want to stop. I want to see all the different endings. And if you've never played it before, I can't recommend it enough. It is not only an amazing game to play, it's an amazing game to look at with a spectacular soundtrack, and it's really fun arcade hardware because this was around the advent of scaling. Before this, you didn't see it anywhere near as much, and until we got 3D hardware in the arcades, this was basically what you got. And when Taito moved to 3D boards, they did not have anywhere near as good of luck with it as somebody like Capcom or Konami or Sega did. Taito 100% struggled in the 3D era, so they're basically a 2D powerhouse back in the day that definitely trailed off once you got into the mid and late 90s. But again, I can't recommend this game enough. This is part of arcade history, not only from the technology but from the game itself, and is 100% worth your time if you so choose to play it. But leave me a comment down below. Tell me, have you played Night Striker? Are you planning on playing it after this video, or are you just not into super scalers? Try that out in another video next week and videos throughout the week, but I am done. Bye-bye.